There's a lot to love about Pakistan. The food, the culture, the beautiful scenery, the warm and welcoming people, to name just a few things. I lived there myself for 3 years and grew to know and love the country. But one thing it has struggled with over the years is its business environment. It's tough. In 1982, the city of Sialkot in the Punjab Province of Pakistan had 1,000 registered businesses. Despite the harsh business environment, by 2024, this had grown to over 16,000 active businesses, with Sialkot contributing over $2 billion in Pakistan's export proceeds, punching well above its weight. It has generated over 100 international brands. But how was a city in such a difficult business environment able to make such a remarkable economic transformation? Find out in today's episode of the Flywheel Economics podcast. Welcome to the Flywheel Economics podcast. Flywheel Economics is a concept that proposes true, sustainable economic growth by viewing economies as ecosystems. I'm your host, Richard O.
And I'm your co-host, Favor Ogbadu. Together, let's explore a more sustainable and powerful way to view innovation, investment, and economic policymaking.
Today, I'm very excited. We have a special guest host, Mr. Jaffer Askari. Jaffer, introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Richard, Faber. Thank you for having me. Like you've said, my name is Jaffer Askari. I've had the pleasure of being a colleague of Richard's in a previous incarnation. I'm an economist by training and by practice. Most of my profession has been spent as a development economist. I've worked for 3 different governments, the Pakistani government, the US government, and the UK government. It depends on how you look at it. I either have 3 different parts of success stories or 3 different parts of examples of how not to do things, but excited to be here, and thank you.
Thanks, Jaffer. Today, we're quite lucky we get to look at an island of excellence in a rather difficult business environment. So looking at the story of Sialkot. Favor, who else do we have to help us understand the Sialkot story?
Yes, today's episode is another exciting one. We got to talk to Dr. Salamat Ali, who is an economic advisor for international trade policy with the Commonwealth Secretariat. We also spoke with Adnan Ghuman, who is an economist with the World Bank. And finally, we spoke with Sohail Nasir Ghuman, who is the director of marketing at Leatherfield, which is a company based in Sialkot, Pakistan. And what is so cool about today is that both Adnan and Sohail happen to be natives of Sialkot. And so they were really able to give us some crucial insights that I believe were just invaluable.
Thank you, Favor. Let's hear from them.
I think this is very interesting question because exports are not only important for Pakistan, but they are important for all emerging economies and for all developing countries. And they are particularly important for Pakistan because Pakistan is the 5th biggest country in terms of the population. So recent census show that it's 250 million people, and exports we know is engine of alleviating poverty. It creates jobs, it leads to inclusion, it increases economic efficiency. So if we look into these lens on the implications of exports for Pakistan, so we have bigger issue of alleviating poverty. Still a lot of people live below the $1.9 poverty line. So there is a strong relationship between GDP growth and exports. If you grow export by 1%, the GDP grows up by 2%. So we can use exports to alleviate that poverty. And second, and the most important issue is the macroeconomic imbalances the country is facing. So you might have noticed the country narrowly escaped default last year. So there's a big difference between exports and imports. Country now exports around 30 to 35 billions worth of goods, and it imports around 70 to 75 billion. So there's a big deficit of 35 billions, which country can only narrow down by increasing their exports. And third, and even the more important thing about promoting export is that exports are engine of inclusion. So Pakistan, I think recent UNDP report says that Pakistan has the highest proportion of the young population in the world. So 64% people in Pakistan are below the age of 30. And out of that, 30% people are in the age bracket of 15 to 30 years. So it means these people need jobs. So export through manufacturing, through economies of scale can help to create jobs for these people. And 50% of the people we know are women. So we need to bring SMEs, women in this domain. So exports can help to overcome these macroeconomic challenges, and export can help as a becoming engine of economic growth and inclusion. So because of these two reasons, I think exports are very important for Pakistan as well as for other countries. So Pakistan export basket is quite narrow. So the 50% of the exports are mainly textiles and garments. And it links to my previous response because it's very much labor-intensive economy. So textile absorbs a lot of labor. So there are factories all over the Pakistan, in Karachi, Lahore, and Faisalabad. So textile is the 50% of exports. Then we have large agriculture sectors. So 18 to 20% exports relate to agriculture. But then there are other clusters of high value goods. Pakistan exports a lot of sports goods. So you will find our bigger brands coming from Pakistan for Nike, for Puma, for Adidas, for garments, for Marks and Spencer. These kind of brands are also produced in Pakistan. And parts of Pakistan also has some niche sectors such as surgical equipments. So we have a city which only produces surgical equipment. Then there are other traditional products like dates and pickle. Export basket is quite diversified. Other than textile is quite diversified. So coming to the second part of your question regarding the markets. So markets are, I think, very diversified. So last time I looked in the data, so in Pakistan, there are overall 205 countries in the world. So Pakistani firms are all exporting almost every country. But there is a huge concentration in terms of products. US is the biggest market, which absorbs around 6 billion worth of exports. And second biggest market is the EU, because EU absorbs around 3 to 4 billion worth of exports. So this pattern has been consistent because Pakistan benefited from GSP scheme, and then before that there was agreement on textile and clothing. So that trade pattern has established and it's going on. But recently, a lot of trade has shifted towards China and Japan and Korea, to that part of the world, mainly because of the development of global value chains. So nowadays, I see a lot of linkages between firms in Pakistan and China. Pakistani firms export raw material, semi-finished goods to China, and these goods are prepared in China, then exported to other parts of the world. So there's a huge diversity in terms of product as well as in terms of markets.
Jaffer, Salamat speaks about the link between exports and growth. Why are exports so important for economic transformation?
Well, there's multiple reasons. I think first is the evidence. First is most of the success stories that are quoted in our field, whether that's East Asia or whether that's other parts of the world, whether that's developing Africa. A lot of the countries, one of the commonalities between, even though they have different models of growth, is the sort of exports rising to the top as engines of growth. There's multiple reasons why exports benefit countries. Obviously, it sort of automatically increases the size of the market available to you. But to me, more importantly, the competition you face from international markets exposes you to a degree of efficiency that you need to survive that would be missing if your competition was restricted to your domestic market only. So cost efficiencies, innovation in technologies to increase your output, even softer things like adhering to standards, and I know this will come later. These are all things that come with the package of exporting and competing in international markets. So I think those are the key things. Just a flag here. It's all trade, right? It's exports is the most beneficial angle for it, but also all trade. So exposing your markets to greater competition also means greater competition to inputs if those are imported. So I think that's the link. And unfortunately, the story isn't very straightforward. It's not a great export success story for Pakistan, but let's get into that later.
Great. So trade can lead to a higher quality of growth. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it can. And then how that export boom sort of spills over into the rest of the economy. So for Pakistan, the hypothesis is that exports would increase our efficiency. If we're able to compete, incomes for exporting sectors would increase, an increase in output, more jobs, hopefully labor intensive to begin with, and then you move up the value chain to more sophisticated goods, higher value added goods, and sort of everyone wins.
Great. Salamat speaks a bit about how diversified the Pakistan's export bundle is. How diversified is it really, Jaffer?
Well, it depends on who you ask, right? So I think for people like us who have spent many years advocating for more diversification, it's the level of diversification isn't ideal. But I think Salamat raises a good point. Sometimes we get so invested in the things that we're working on that we forget to take a win as a win. So it's not one of the most diversified export baskets in the world. A big chunk of it is textiles and related goods. But that said, there's a lot of other groups that I think I at least have been guilty of taking for granted. But there's sports goods, there's leather, there's surgical goods, there's agri-related goods. So I think touche to Salamat for that reminder. I'm still a little cynical about how diversified we are, but I think yes, it's important to mention that there are multiple goods in the basket. Even though I'm not sure what the number is, but it's somewhere around the 40-50% on concentrated around textiles.
Thank you, Jaffer. Favor, what have we got up next?
Yes, next up, we're going to be listening to our guests talk about the Sialkot business community and basically just give us an overview.
Now I've come to realize that Sialkot has done things ahead of its time in Pakistan. And it is particularly because of the human resource and people and their thinking. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with education or academic achievements. It has to do with people's common will to create value for themselves and for society. I think this is at the very heart of it. So Sialkot is an old city. It's one of those cities in Indian subcontinent and Pakistan which has a rich history, which goes back much longer in history compared to when Pakistan came into existence in 1947. So I think in that sense, it's like one of those traditional cities in this part of India and Pakistan that you go. There's an old part of the city, like you go to Lahore and you go to Delhi. There's the old part, and then there's a new part, and you could see that how city has evolved, and now it's a very bustling kind of like place. It's expanding in all directions. But mainly it used to be an agriculture center because of the geographical location. It's situated in the footsteps of the Pir Panjal mountain range next to Kashmir. So it has lots of water. River Chenab flows very close to it. So water and natural endowments were always there. So of course the best talent kind of like pooled there automatically in that sense. Back in the day, agriculture was the main part of the subcontinent economy. But gradually, during the British India time, I think a lot evolved. People from Kashmir migrated to Sialkot, and the city became quite a center point in terms of it had a railway junction, so a line would connect the Kashmir with Punjab to Sialkot. So of course it became a trading route as well, and a lot of Kashmiris came and settled, and they brought a lot of craft with them. For example, steel work, for example, different craftships. And there's this old tale in that craftship that there was this British garrison that used to play soccer or some version of soccer, and they had a ball which got busted, and they wanted to repair it. So they went to a local cobbler, and that's how the soccer ball industry started in Sialkot. So people came to know about it, excuse me, and they thought that this is a good way to make some money. So I think it's very much in the DNA, and you see that. And as a kid growing up in Sialkot, I saw that in everyone. There was always some discussion about doing something, creating something in terms of doing some small business or doing something or doing even like one tranche business. So people had this in mind. And if I recall all my classmates from high school and from college, early days of college, most of them ended up in their family business because these are all family run businesses. So to cut the long story short, I think it's very much in the part and parcel of DNA of the city. And it's a culture, it's a habitat which has been created by the dynamism of people, their collective thinking, and their will to cooperate, create value for each other. Because see, when you are working at such a small scale compared to cities like Karachi and Lahore, which have the large industry in Pakistan, you need a certain amount of cooperation to bring around knowledge, learning, and share that as well.
So coming to the Sialkot, the thing is this that you see, Sialkot, here are more small and medium size enterprises. These are not the people. There is not very high tech industry, but the peoples are they self very I will say focused, and they start some like the main industries like surgical instruments, sportswear. Then we are making soccer balls, we are making hockey, we are making cricket balls, making uh, so the people are more labor intensive, and they have seen that the Chinese to carry the whole world and to make the product according to the European type standards. Like really myself very say please that we are making surgical instruments which are more uh, uh, has certain requirements. They are like I know for the garments we have to pass go through a lot of testings and requirements. So similarly for the surgical instruments, but most of the people who are not so much educated, but still they are capable of making very good product and they are selling. And I think it's like 70% of global surgical instruments business where is being made in Sialkot. Similarly, football, it's like almost like 50% of the global requirements are being fulfilled from Sialkot.
So Sialkot we call as the island of excellence. So it's a very small city where it's totally export-oriented economy. 99% farm in the city are all exporting. So what they export? So Sialkot mainly exports high-value goods. As I mentioned, they export a lot of high-end brands like Puma, Adidas, Nike, Unix. So nowadays you see Euro Cup happening in here as well as T20 happening in the US. So 70% of the soccer ball used in the Euro Cup and the previous FIFA Cups were produced in Sialkot. And similarly in T20, all these cricket bats and balls and all of the gloves, everything comes from Sialkot. So Sialkot has a big footprint on the sports industry. The second biggest thing which comes from the Sialkot and the neighboring town is surgical equipment. They produce a lot of surgical equipment which are exported from Sialkot. And other things are nowadays have become more important: agricultural products, perishable foods, which are mainly sent to Middle East and European economies. But what is the main difference between Sialkot and other part of the global Pakistani economy is that Sialkot has a big hub of contract manufacturing. So in contract manufacturing, big buyers in Western market, they send their raw materials and expertise to Sialkot, and gets their goods manufactured from there. Because a lot of raw material for leather garments, for footballs, for sports stuff is imported into Sialkot, and these goods are processed there, and then goods are sent out. Second most important thing about Sialkot is that it is very much SME driven city. So Sialkot has 16,000 firms which are registered with the Sialkot Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And these firms are some of them are very small, some might have 5 to 6 employees, and some of them are very big, maybe 7,000, 8,000 employees. But the big chunk of these firms is SMEs. And it's basically SME driven city, and which is benefiting from this contract manufacturing. And third and final thing about Sialkot is that most of these products are high value added, so low volume and high value. So these end up in the niche markets because there has been tradition of producing these high value goods. That's why they are benefiting from this contract manufacturing and getting into the big supply chains. Thanks, Richard. I have seen in the data as well as talking to the colleagues in Sialkot. So Sialkot export-oriented industry has large impact on the local economy as well as the whole country. So last year, Pakistan exported around 30 billion worth of goods, and out of which 2.5 billion originated only from this one city. And that's quite big chunk of export, and it has been consistently throughout. Coming to its benefit to local economy, I think we can look at from two dimensions. One is the immediate benefit which the city and the neighboring area is having, and second is the long-term benefit where the city is heading. In terms of immediate benefits, so Sialkot Chamber of Commerce and Industry established Sialkot Dry Port in 1984. That was the first private sector-led dry port or customs station in Pakistan, anywhere in the world. And then in 2007, they established the Sialkot International Airport. That was again private sector-driven and self-financed project. So this project has created 900 direct jobs. So 900 employees work at the airport. That is mainly from the private sector, but the airport is not about these people. There are so many regulatory agencies. There's airport security force, there's custom, there are other regulatory bodies. So most agencies have expanded to bring airport into their fold. So in direct effect of Sialkot is 6,000 to 7,000 jobs for the local economy. And then there is second order effect, that's passenger traffic. At the moment, Sialkot Airport is served by Gulf Airline, Emirates Airline, and Qatar Airlines. And a lot of local people are benefiting from that travel corridor. So currently around 2,000 people travel from Sialkot every day. And occupancy rate of airline is 80 to 90%. That means flight tickets for the Sialkot are actually expensive than other bigger cities, Lahore and Islamabad, because there's so much demand for that. So that is another benefit to the local economy. They are benefiting from it in terms of travel. And third effect has been through export of perishable goods. So one of the drivers to go for the Sialkot airport was that Sialkot has a kind of culture of community-based and inclusiveness. Because this is the highest educated city in Pakistan. So when I was student in uni way back in 1993, at that time Sialkot had a literacy rate of 99%. So that literacy rate translated into community spirit. So people want to look after their community and the neighboring areas. So that's why they started this project. And Sialkot had a unique kind of tax, but they call it Sialkot specific tax, just to invest in the infrastructure. And that tax has led to creation of dry port and the airport. So they wanted to bring the peripheries and the surrounding agricultural areas in the fold also. So agriculture products exports have also expanded from the Sialkot, Middle East, and other parts of the world. So these are some of the benefits which are immediate, which economy has realized. But in terms of long-term benefits, so this project is just the beginning. So they recently started work on the second terminal of the Sialkot International Airport and the second runway. So they've already. And other project they have started is the 5-star hotel in Sialkot. At the moment, the city has only 4-star hotels, and a lot of buyers travel from the US, EU, and UK. So they want to visit those factories. They want to ensure compliance of different sustainability regulations. So they want to stay in Sialkot. So Sialkot Chamber has started that 5-star hotel. So it's already construction is in progress. So they're also venturing into the medical supply chains. So they are starting another project called Sialkot Medical City. So they're working on it. So these are kind of the benefits which will accrue in future. So these benefits are mainly related to Sialkot, but in terms of wider benefit to the Pakistan's economy, so Sialkot Chamber of Commerce, which is driver of all these initiatives, so that is part of bigger association called Pakistan Federation of Commerce and Industry. So that is industry body based in Karachi. So that industry body is basically learning a lot from the Sialkot, and they are trying to replicate these projects in different part of the country. For instance, Peshawar Chamber of Commerce is learning from them. There's another city called Sakkar, which exports date and pickle. So they are trying to replicate that model. There is a wider recognition in the government as well as in the trade community that we need to replicate that model. And one of the direct or indirect effect has been that so normally there's a big distrust between government and the private sector. But this model has proved that government and private sector can work together and they can expand this kind of. So these benefits are mainly related to Pakistan, but I have seen more ripple effect of these kind of initiatives abroad. So recently, Harvard Business School has taken up Sialkot project as a case study. So they are teaching that to students in the business. And I have seen some documentation paper written by World Bank on the progress of the Sialkot project. So they have done some work on that. But this, we can see the ripple effect is slowly expanding for the local economy, for the whole country, as well as globally.
Pakistan is a hard place to do business, despite the fact that it's been improving modestly over time. I think in 2020, the last time they did ease of doing business rankings, it was 108 globally in the rankings. So it's a tough place to do business. Jaffer, you've grown up in Pakistan, you live in Pakistan. What is notable about Sialkot and its business community to you?
Thanks, Richard. Staying true to character, if I can just comment on the challenges of exporting. I think the one thing that comes to mind is Thomas Hobbes and his reflection of life without government being nasty, brutish, and short. I think exporting in Pakistan, the life of an exporting firm, not without, but in many ways due to government, is nasty, brutish, and short. And I think it was one of the papers Salamat, your interviewee, worked on that opened my mind to this the first time, where the numbers were shocking. I'll try to dig it up for you later, but I think it was horrendous, where the average lifespan of an exporting firm was between 4 and 5 years. Most firms that were exporting weren't using exports as their main source of business, so they were primarily serving the domestic market and branching off in exports. But overall, a very depressing, dull, and gritty situation. I think that's the backdrop that makes Sialkot stand out to the extent that it does. Growing up in Pakistan, you're always hearing about the Sialkot business community. I think what was a wake-up call was that it's not one of the biggest export groups or business groups in Pakistan. Yet, I think there's a strong argument to be made that it's one of the most competitive and one of the most successful. So I think to anyone with an interest in this area, that's a big highlight, right? What sets them apart from the other people living a nasty, short, and brutish life? The other thing that I think, being part of the interviews that you had for this, that opened my mind to it, is not just the economic characteristics of Sialkot, but also the level of cooperation between the business community. I think that is also something that requires further attention. It's also something that sets them apart from the rest of the country. I'm not going to hypothesize on what the reasons are behind that, whether they're economic or whether, as some might suggest, they're they're softer and more culturally inclined in nature. I'm not sure, but those two things. And then obviously we have the airport, but those are things, and Sialkot has a habit of doing this, right? Every 5 to 7 years, it will throw out a success story, whether those are footballs, whether that's an airport, that you just don't expect from a segment of the business society in Pakistan, not because of their innate ability, just because everyone around them is suffering to get their businesses up. So I think there's enough there to pique anyone's curiosity and interest.
Yeah, I think that's well observed, Jaffer. I also liked a lot when Sohail, we get sort of two contrary type of views as to why the mindset in Sialkot business community might be the way it is. And so you have Sohail, who sort of sets out this very much a we're the underdogs, we're the we're the city that was in the war games in the 1970s, supposed to be sort of given up to India in order to protect Lahore. A very sort of the culture defining itself based on being, we're not going to get support from anywhere else. And then I think with Adnan, you get this slightly this different mindset that it's in the DNA to be collaborative and to cooperate and to tackle community projects together. And so it leads me to the question, if we think at sort of Sohail's view as being very much about the environment at which people grow up, and if we think about Adnan's view as very much being in the DNA and very much, is it nature or nurture, Jaffer? What is it in this community's mindset, do you think?
I wonder if that's a question for a more detailed research exercise. But just to answer it, I think it's both. I think Salamat sort of, you can also nurture nature, right? And Salamat points to this in his interview when he highlights education. So if you do education long enough, you sort of influence the nature of the community. So as much as I hate that answer, because that leads us down a much longer path and makes replication a 20, 30-year exercise rather than a 5-year exercise. But I think there's a point there on education that sort of appeals to the middle ground between nature and nurture. I think the other thing that is valid here is to protect Sialkot from what has been meddling state interventions in other areas. And I think one of the reasons why that has happened might be what Sohail was talking about sort of, like, he kept saying dead end, right? So no one was paying attention is, I think, what he means. But also I think there's an economic characteristic of it. So all of these, the sports good industry, the leather industry, the surgical goods industry, these are islands of success, but they're just below that level in quantum, in terms of dollars, where they're hundreds of millions rather than billions, where the government isn't politicizing it or doesn't care enough to politicize it. So I think that's an added dynamic here that sets Sialkot apart. So if it was textiles, and if it was in multiple billions of dollars in terms of export receipts that we are talking about, I doubt Sialkot would have achieved what they did achieve, even if they had the same DNA. Even if it was in the water in Sialkot, I think the problem would have been a lot more difficult if it was larger.
Thanks, Jaffer. Favor, in episode 2, we looked at a different case study. We looked at the Yaba Tech Cluster in Lagos, Nigeria. Do you see any similarities here at all between what you were hearing about the Sialkot business community and what we saw with the Yaba Tech community?
Yeah, actually, I do. And it's just like Jaffa mentioned, there was this cooperation that the Sialkot community has, and it's so vital. I think that we're still going to go into this later, but one thing that we see already is the importance of collaboration. Collaboration is key. The same thing we had in Yaba Tech Cluster, there was a catalyst from CC Hub. But what CC Hub was able to achieve was bring about a community of people that cared about their community, that cared about this growing cluster, and together they collaborated. That was essential to the success of that cluster. And here we see it again. This time is the business people of Sialkot coming together, bringing out from their profit, deciding to do big things that can move their community forward. So over and over, it's like we're beginning to see a pattern that for this success story, there's an element of collaboration and togetherness.
Great. Well, let's go into the next part of the story now, which looks at how the airport project was embarked upon.
I think people think of this as something which has taken off with the airport, but there is a history which led to the building of or the construction of the airport. I think there was a sizable SME footprint in Sialkot, which concentrated mostly in leather, in sports, in surgical, in soccer. And there were quite big names in that industry who were able to run these businesses for multi decades prior to the build of the airport, which happened in the first decade of 2000s. So the portfolio was largely of sports good. So in sports, you have cricket, you have hockey, you have soccer, you have sports garments as well. So there was a textile part as well, which is relatively less known fact about it, because sports garments are largely textile, and textile is usually associated with Faisalabad in Pakistan. But Sialkot had a sizable portfolio in that sense as well. Then it was leather garments, and leather garments, especially designer wear. Then gloves, leather gloves of various kind of like categories. So this was a big kind of like big chunk of the portfolio. Of course, it had certain issues as well. So, for example, leather tanning was one big thing in Sialkot, which created a lot of water pollution. So, of course, that is something the industry has been able to overcome with the help of the government and international agencies as well over a period of time. But this was what was at the core of it. And of course, there were some big players who collectively found the Sialkot Chamber of Commerce as well. So, Sialkot Chamber of Commerce mainly consisted of these business houses. So, and since it was a cooperative effort, they always struggled with the fact that they had access issues, because the clients would come to Lahore or would come to Karachi and would not travel to Sialkot. Similarly, they had issues shipping their cargoes as well, because Pakistan, if you look at the geography as well, Pakistan is a long strip of land where Karachi, the only port, is right at the end of the Pakistan. So Sialkot is like in the upper end. So of course, this also dictated a lot of the outcomes in terms of like pushing for an airport connectivity challenge and the transportation challenge. But there was a critical mass, and the capital was there as well, because these people had benefited a lot from exporting, obviously in smaller chunks, but they had the capital and the collective will. Of course, they didn't have the government support, which came later, because there was this infrastructure development effort going on in the mid 90s, which is relatively less external audience, I would say. Sialkot had a very rundown infrastructure because it's a city which suffered, like many other cities like Gujranwala and Gujarat, that the critical mass of the city would leave to Lahore and Islamabad beyond attaining a certain educational level. But in the mid 90s, there was this effort to build the city in terms of like, now we have money, we should give back to the society, and because government is not doing its end. So a big chunk of road infrastructure, water sanitation within the city, water treatment was built by the industry. And I think when that venture saw success and city saw a certain transformation in that sense, I think then they set a much higher goal for themselves to go for the aim. So this is kind of like the context where the industry and the private sector stood and what their contribution to society was prior to the build-up of the airport. I mean, it's a good question, and I think the answer is you can't pinpoint one thing to say that this led to this. Of course, there was the motivation of expansion, business expansion, because there was self-interest, because clients would come and they would really struggle to visit Sialkot because there was no hospitality industry, and the hospitality industry, of course, also was curtailed because there was no connectivity. Roads were in very poor shape. Sanitation was in very poor shape. Sialkot had like open FPC in within the city. I'm not talking about a rural part of Sialkot. We're talking about the downtown metropolitan Sialkot, which got flooded within every monsoon. And then, of course, traveling from Lahore to Sialkot was quite a challenge. So I think the effort was to create a brand image for Sialkot, that Sialkot has these business houses and they should create a brand for themselves. But at the same time, it came from the fact that there wasn't much support from the government. It was not considered as you would consider, like Sialkot would not have the same status maybe as Faisalabad, which is famous because of textile, or maybe of Karachi. So the industrialists thought that okay, we can together a fund where we can all pitch in, and this would create value. And of course, it created a lot of value. So, I mean, there are, of course, very direct positive links, and there are some externalities as well. I'll come negative externalities. I'll come to that later. I think the positive link is that the activity increased. There were direct flights from Sialkot to Middle East and Middle East to connect onwards. There were direct flights from Sialkot to Karachi as well. So, of course, that brought a lot of traffic to Sialkot. Even people from surrounding districts were coming to Sialkot to travel. So, general increase in business, hospitality industry, hotel, restaurants, that increase. Then government was forced to invest in infrastructure as well, roads, because airport cannot be in the middle of nowhere. It has to be connected. So there were bridges that were built, there were roads that were built, a special link road. Because if you look at the locality of the airport, it's very much at the center of all the traffic that is going in that part of Punjab and Kashmir. You get connected very easily. But there was a need for infrastructure development. Then, of course, businesses expanded, especially those businesses which needed to do real-time shipments. They benefited a lot because initially all the international airlines started their cargo services to Sialkot. So I think that helped both in terms of access to raw material in real time and in terms of shipments going out in real time. And then because they were very strategic in the sense that airport was developed on a piece of land, which of course has displaced certain landowners. But this was not a piece of land which had very high agriculture productivity. This was a land which had very low agriculture productivity. The only unfortunate part is that in Pakistan, there's a mindset when you have airports, there's a tendency to build housing around the airports. That airport would be something which will galvanize the core services needed for housing and residence, and that kind of like draw a lot of attention to the real estate development in that area. I see that as a big negative externality, because even though the airport where it was constructed, the land was not very fertile, but the land around that area was very fertile. So of course that led to blocking of a huge chunk of land which was not utilized till very recently, and still it's locked. People have kind of like started creating housing or residential societies which are not fully developed for settling, and government services have not arrived in terms of electricity, gas, and those kind of services. So I think that led to some loss of capital as well, or some capital getting stuck in area which is totally non-productive. Of course, the environmental challenge, because if you have an airport, you have roads, you have more traffic coming in. But I would generally say that the positives have been far, far greater than the negative loss. Of course, some of these challenges, industry is thinking about them already. The environmental challenge, because it exceeds the issue of airport. Sialkot comes in a belt which is very much impacted by the smog in these parts of subcontinent in winters. So there's already a lot of con- conversation about how there can be a broader kind of like solution to the smog issue. But yes, the both positives and negatives, but positives far greater. Benefit to the industry, benefit to the hospitality and restaurant services, connectivity improving. With that, access to education and healthcare improving. So overall employment, I mean, lots of benefits.
War games, like strategy by our army, it was like this, that if India will invade to us, they can give like Sialkot to them and they will try to save to Lahore. So it was like least preferred area by the government. So gradually, the people living here, they there was like in '85, there was one a gentleman who was from Sialkot. I do remember his name was probably Riaz Bhutta Sahab. He was of this view that if the government is not able to support us, then someday we have to rise up. So from the platform of Chambers of Commerce, he invited all the people that we should start donating like whenever we are receiving the amounts in dollars. So for each dollar we should give like a penny, like 25 cents or 50 cents or 1 rupee against one. We can, it should be collected by the banks, and we should pool it for the developments of Sialkot. Before, like till 90, the Sialkot was in very bad condition. I mean, there were no roads, there was no university. We were very close to Lahore. All the developments we were supposed to be done here, they were technically being shifted to Lahore. There was like in 1980, there was a proposal to give a medical college here. It was later on again shifted to Lahore because the local government cannot handle it, cannot give a land for that. So when the business communities thought about their city, so first of all they thought that okay, we will donate the money. So that was like the first drop, and they gathered the money and they started making the roads. So it took like 4 or 5 years, and he was, though he died like in I think in 1990, but he gave this idea that Sialkot is at such a place that we have two cities like Gujranwala is on one side, and this is Gujarat is on side, so we can become a trika, and some people it can become a very good industrial area. So we need to rise with our own donation, with our own efforts. So first of all, they made a dry port. For dry port trust, it is also trust because all the shipments were going to Lahore, systems were being done, and it was taking longer time. So first, on the trial basis, they made this. First, they couldn't make like LDN as like a development authority as it is in Lahore. But on the platform of Sialkot, they were giving tenders and they were making the roads. So first that was the success story. Then they made it Sialkot Raipur Trust. Then we thought about it. The same people, you see, there are middle-sized people are they're not millionaires, but they're making good money in Pakistan. Like for example, someone is able to earn 3, 4, 5 crores a year, so they have ample money for the sake of more on repute. So they thought about making this Sialkot airport because you see the for the government it was not feasible because from here we are 280 kilometers. It's Islamabad, and it is like 120 kilometers. It is Lahore. So and the other all the airports being made in Pakistan are on political basis. It is either made in Sindh or in Balochistan, and they all are incurring losses. So the government, any government was not having a feasibility that any airport in Sialkot is going to be successful. So then the people of Sialkot, they thought about it, and they really like there are 300, 400 the people who are the director of it. They thought about it, contributing the money like 1 crore per head or per share. So they were able to then get the money. Then there were some land at which there is the airport is it's not a very fertile land. So then they were able to acquire it. So I will say it was like more for the prestige of their city, or for get really uh, the environment which they were forcing for their businesses and for their honor. See, the thing is this, that you see, as it was like for the government, it was a free ride, because they were there. On politically thing, there was like from always there are full of very powerful mysteries are always given to Sialkot. And so for them also, that once there was the development and all the expenses are being borne from by the local community. So for the government, it was not a difficult thing to accept. Yes, there was like legal procedures, that NOCs, and who is going to be running it, how is going to be the airport security, these things. But gradually, with the interaction of them with our people from Sialkot, everything was settled. And you see, the main thing is always for governments are the is the money. If someone is going to say to them that we are going to make a new city in the name of government, and the finances are from us, most of the cases they do agree with it, because they are the development is coming under their name, but they have not to pay any money for that. It's, you see, some of the things are just to supporting thing. They are not like the solution. Airport, it has given, as I said, that okay, we were, for example, whenever I was traveling earlier, I was planning 5 hours before to catch a flight from Lahore. So now I am catching like 2 hours before. So it has saved my 3 hours. So it has given me more confidence and uh, more room to do the other things. So overall, you see, the airport is like, and similarly on many occasions, like for the flights, if there is like deadline that in leather garments or other things, these are seasonal, and so definitely it has it has helped to ease doing the business. Not it has given like all the solution, and gradually you see the other things will, as I said, that this is if it is going to be airline, that is going to be a very good business. Now the infrastructure is going to be developed part. That area where there is area, we were not going there in after like 6 o'clock. We were always considering that it's not a safe area. But now the real estate in all the surroundings, that is gradually improving. As I said, that Ramada, they are building one hotel which earlier was not good by anyone, because I said that the people were concerned. So that we were having our own guest house like for 10 bedrooms, and whenever customers were coming, we were taking to them there. But now, while once it's going to be a hotel, so it will change the aspects of doing business in this field. Definitely, you see, as I said, that it is more convenient for the buyers. Come here, it saves a lot of time, and I mean, you see, uh, all this, and as I mentioned, that people living here are like workers. They're not like managers. They're not like Bill Gates or those people. But now they have started believing in themselves. That's the reason that those people who were the directors who were earlier making just like surgical instruments, they thought about, okay, they are going to like be a part of an airline company. So it gives them confidence, and overall, you see, the it is very beneficial for the people who are in north of Sialkot, and also towards the west of Sialkot, like Jhelum, Gujarat. So a lot of people are aware that there are going to be more flights. So many people are preferring that instead of going to Lahore, which is already very crowdy and it takes more time. So they are preferring to come to Sialkot.
That's a wrap on the first part of our Sialkot episode. We've just listened to our special guest give us a detailed rundown of Pakistan's trade context, the wondrous Sialkot business community, and the incredible story of how the Sialkot International Airport was built. But don't go anywhere yet. In part 2 of the episode, we'll take a look at the challenges the airport faced on its way to being constructed. Our guests also give us insights into why it was able to succeed, and finally, we dissect the biggest lessons with our guest host. In the meantime, Continue this conversation with us by heading over to our social media channels at Flyway Economics. And for a deeper dive into stories just like this, check out our website at flywayeconomics.com. Until next time, this has been the Flyway Economics podcast.